Hello and welcome to Abbeyfield Presents Hidden Treasures. My name's Adam Rees and I'm the Chief Executive of Abbeyfield Bristol and Cambridgeshire Society.
And I'm Michele Wainwright. I'm the General Secretary of Abbeyfield England, which is the membership body for all local Abbeyfield societies across the UK. And we are really pleased to be here for our first ever podcast.
Yes, we are. And the first podcast today, we're going to be talking about the history of Abbeyfield, so explaining how the organisation has come over the last 70 years. My society in Bristol has been going 60 years as well, so it's really important for us to talk about where we came from and how we are today in a different culture with a different generation of older people.
I think as well the history of Abbeyfield is very much about the history of Abbeyfield connections. You know, we often talk about this internally, but we really need to be talking a bit more about what we call the best kept secret, which is Abbeyfield and the connections that happen within our houses and with our residents. And really the treasures, they're what we're talking about. The hidden treasures are the stories of Abbeyfield.
Yeah, and when we were coming up with a name, part of the little pun on that was talking about the fact that you're 70 years old next year, your organisation,
No, I'm
not you.
No, I'm not actually 70. I'm not far off, but I'm not. It's obviously Abbeyfield is 70 years old, and Bristol's not that far behind.
No, so we started 10 years after the Abbeyfield movement.
So that's 130 years in total. Can we do that? Can we say 130 years old? We can't. We can't really do that. But we are going to have a big celebration in 2026 because I think for 70 years, for what started off as a single house in Bermondsey by our founder, who's actually we have a picture of, Richard Cargom, has really it escalated so quickly. Historically, you know, when you look back, it rolled on, didn't it? You know, we started with one house. Then all of a sudden, there was houses in Bristol 10 years later. Yeah. Houses in the north, houses across the UK. And
in this podcast, we're going to be talking a bit about how Richard Cargom set that organisation up and how it kind of started to move and who got involved and where each of those houses came from. The interesting fact for me, I suppose, is the Bristol and Cambridgeshire Society is a separate independent organisation while we're all part of Abbeyfield England.
Yeah. I think that might be quite confusing when we speak externally about Abbeyfield and we say Abbeyfield England. Every society is a separate organisation, but they follow that ethos. That was the original house was set up to achieve, which is really to be very much bottom-led organisations that help to look after older people in the communities, that really tried to address loneliness and isolation in many ways.
Yeah, and for us as Bristol and Cambridgeshire, we've just got 4 houses, we're 71 residents, so that's quite a small organisation on its own, but the strength for me is being part of Abbeyfield England and knowing that I've got local organisations, other Abbeyfields nearby that I can call if I want to talk about something or we want to do something together. So even though we're quite independent and individual, that strength in numbers is really important.
Oh, collectively, you know, we're collectively together, the Abbeyfield brand, you know, can work together to achieve a lot and to help each other. It is really about helping each other. You know, we're quite unique now, Abbeyfield. You know, the model, the not-for-profit, the involvement we have from trustees, from voluntary people who've actually been involved in Abbeyfield for like longer than I've been born, probably. You know, there's an attachment, a connection from trustees to Abbeyfield.
And I think at this point it's probably useful to talk about what is Abbeyfield at the very basic level. So actually for us, we provide housing, independent and supported housing for older people. So people will come and live in one of our houses with their own flat. They'll have their own space and they're able to do as they please and leave and come as they want. But actually the core part for us is the social activities. So every day people come together at least twice a day for meals. They come together and our cooks provide home cooked meals. They get to see each other and to interact. And then they can choose to go back to their rooms or to their flats they can go outside. But actually they've got the choice of having interaction. And through this podcast, we've got some great interviews with some of our residents, and they tell that same story, the choice they have about being on their own if they want, but not having to feel isolated because people are around them.
Yeah, I'll be honest, before I was involved in Abbeyfield, which hasn't been very long, I knew very little about the Abbeyfield societies. And then I realised when I come in, I thought, why do I not know this? These are options people should know about. These are the work that volunteers do, as well as the staff, to create these warm home from home environments for residents. It is a treasure, and I think that's why we said we call it hidden treasures, because it is a treasure and it should be out there far more. But Richard Cargom, I mean, I don't know whether you knew more about him before you started working for Abbeyfield, Adam, but if you remember, he won the Lifetime Achievement Award. Yeah. And I think we're in Bristol today. Carol Vorderman, who's a resident of Bristol, presented him with that Lifetime Achievement Award. And that was, 20 years ago, maybe? Yeah. And I don't know if you remember being...
No, and I didn't know much about him. I've got a friend who's used to do my job and is one of the people we've interviewed for this podcast, Sue Perry. And Sue's knew Richard for a long time because of her connection to Abbeyfield. So I'd heard about Abbeyfield and Richard through Sue before I'd started here. But actually, I think it's one of those things that we talk about best kept secret as a kind of a bit of a slogan. And I don't necessarily like that, because I don't think Abbeyfield should be a secret. But I do think it's under-celebrated. And that's kind of that's the aim of the podcast. So should we jump in our time machines and go back to 1956?
Yes, which was, I suppose what you say was very much the post-war times, the housing, slums, maybe even. I mean, I'm not overly familiar with the area where he started out in Bermondsey. The house is no longer there. No. But that's where he started, one single house, trying to make a difference. Yeah,
and I think the history of Richard Cargom is that he came back from the war, was a warranted officer and wanted to make a difference. So he contacted his local community and started working as an unpaid home help with older people. Through those conversations, he realised that actually the biggest problem for a lot of older people in that time, and still today, was loneliness. So what he wanted to do was to create an opportunity to bring older people together into some kind of alternative family unit. And that's where the idea of Abbeyfield came around.
And that's when we talk a lot, don't we, about the Abbeyfield family. And it's individual families within the houses, and then the Abbeyfield family in general, all the societies together, all working to that same end.
And from that first house in Bermondsey that was created, they wanted to invite about 8 or 9 older people in, and actually 5 of those older people said no because they were too proud to take charity and to take that support, which is still an issue that we see today with our residents. They're actually, the idea of coming into something, leaving their homes and moving into somewhere where they're being helped, in their view, is often a challenge. So it's interesting some of those themes continue through.
Well, when you think about it, Richard Cargom was like the first house manager. And that's, in all of our homes now, that's one of the key parts of the key member of staff, really, in the houses, is the house manager. And Richard Cargom was the very first one. Yeah,
so in our second episode, we're going to be looking at inside our houses and talk to you about the structure of how the houses work in most cases and what that looks like. But I think that's a really important part, is actually that the core of it is always those different people. So we've interviewed some cooks in this podcast as well in some of our houses, and they talk about it being a family. So while they work a certain number of hours and they do their jobs, they see their residents as part of their family, and the residents see them as part of the family. We all grieve if a resident leaves, and residents kind of all celebrate when they come together to do things, and residents argue in the same way as our families do. And I think that's kind of the strength of what we're talking about.
See, families is always the key, isn't it? It's always the connection. Because I remember watching something about Richard Cargom, and he was saying about, obviously it was post-war, there was a lot of scattering or displacement of families, so as things evolve and, maybe grandparents would have stayed with the children and the grandchildren, there was displacement, so they were looking for that alternative family unit. And then you press forward now and we go to 2025, and there's still that scattering of family for other reasons. So that alternative family unit is something that we should be looking for.
Exactly, and I think that that's what inspired the movement. So after the first house in Bermondsey in 1956, as we said, within 10 years, Bristol had started to build houses and to open those. And when we say build and open houses, that was done by community members. So different towns and different cities across England, Wales and Scotland were inspired by what Richard Cargon was doing, and individual communities started to fundraise the money to buy houses to make their own Abbeyfields.
I mean, that's the other treasure. There's just so many treasures about Abbeyfield. You know, there's, you know, obviously our residents are the treasures of Abbeyfield. But, you know, the volunteers, the voluntary work that we see that has built Abbeyfield houses, that maintains Abbeyfield houses, you know, that people seem, they don't want to let go of their Abbeyfield houses. They're so invested. And
I think this is probably a good time. We've got a really great clip from Sue Perry, who, as I said, has worked with Abbeyfield for decades and used to do my job. And she had the opportunity to meet Richard Cargon at one point. So it would be great to listen to what she had to say.
Brilliant.
Richard Cargon was such a remarkable man. He was never honoured as he should have been during his lifetime. I think he probably upset too many people in his quiet, dogged way. There was a do being arranged by Abbeyfield nationally at Highgrove. So we all trooped round there and so on, waited in the waiting room with Prince Charles' pictures on the wall and so on. And this was before he had his separate meeting place built. But we were actually in the house. So the dogs were wandering around and the fires were lit and so on. And Richard Cargon was sitting on the windowsill with his wife, Susan. And I said to him, I have been fortunate in my life to meet a number of people who've seen a need and gone and done something about it. Whereas I'd be faffing around thinking, well, how's it going to be organised? Where's the money coming from? And so on. And he just looked at me and said, but it's down to people like you who come and help that it becomes a success. Totally ignoring his contribution and the effect that his ideas and his personality and his character had on people to help get them to help. And it was with a group called Christian Teamwork that he set up, that the first Abbeyfield house was set up in the first place. And that was in a time when churches did not link together. There was no ecumenical spirit. You know, Catholics looked after Catholics, Baptists after Baptists and so on. And so he was just a quite remarkable man. I've been involved with Abbeyfield for a very long time, started off as a volunteer and then became what turned out to be director of the Abbeyfield Bristol Society, which at one point had 12 houses. And before I left, I retired about 10 or 15 years ago now. I've lost the plot about that. I had sold at the behest of the executive committee 10 houses which could not be upgraded to provide what we now felt was needed by people coming into or looking for accommodation for older people, independent accommodation.
And what did you think was needed?
Well, the two big things were ensuite rooms for everyone. And a lot of the houses we had, I mean, I'm thinking of 11 Morris Road, which was in St Andrews, lovely setting on the edge of Park, but there was no way you could provide ensuite facilities. The plumbing wasn't right. And in Bristol, you've got had big houses like that, large Victorian semi-detached houses, but with not very much land with them. In other parts of the country you have large tracts of land, so you can put up an extra block of rooms or whatever and put in a stair lift. Because a lift, because that's the other thing. It's ensuite facilities and lifts. Most of the houses that were deemed sellable and were sold were not suitable for either. They weren't big enough.
What do you think Richard Cargon would make of Abbeyfield today?
I think he would be optimistically reassured that the society, A, still exists, B, is as broad-based as it is now, across the world, and that it is still carrying out his aims and objectives, except that originally he wasn't thinking of elderly people only. He was looking at a mixed group, younger people as well, but that didn't work out, and I can't remember quite what happened with that, but it didn't quite work out. I think he would be quite unassuming about it and think, oh, that's wonderful that so many people have done this, and so on.
No, that was great. I think Sue really tells the story of what's happened with Abbeyfield over the time. And actually, I think that important bit is how those houses have changed. Because when we started in Bristol, we had 13 houses and each of them only had a couple of people, as Sue said. But that's the needs of older people have changed and the expectations. So you can't imagine our residents not having an ensuite bathroom now, or not having lifts to be able to get to their rooms. And I think that even though we see the journey and we're now looking at the future of older people's needs, the core is still there. That kind of core of Abbeyfield and that connection of Abbeyfield is still there.
I mean, I absolutely love Sue. I think her involvement in Abbeyfield just epitomises what the Abbeyfield family is all about, and she's still there.
Yeah, well, Abbeyfield's like the Goodfellas. You can't really escape even if you want to.
I like that. I like that. No, you can't. You can't get out once you're in. You're in. That's it. What's the Godfather? I think that's Goodfellas. I think that's the Godfather. Once you're in. What is it? Once you're out, they pull you back in, something like that. Anyway, but that is Abbeyfield. That is Sue Perry, and she is incredible. But she does show the changes that are involved for all our staff, people like yourself, Adam.
Yeah.
And the modernisation agenda for the housing sector.
Yeah, and also that idea that actually, when we're talking about older people, that term has changed. So Richard Cargon was working with people who were retiring, so 60-year-old women and 65-year-old men. And now you can't imagine anybody up until 70 seeing themselves as an older person. So when we're inviting new people in at the moment, we're talking about people in their mid to late 70s, if not older sometimes, who are still independent, often still living on their own and doing their own activities. So just the image of older people is very different now than it was in the 50s.
Oh, I think so. I think the days of 60-year-old retired women are well gone.
Yeah.
I think we're looking at a lot older than that. But I think that's the point, is what is the house there for? What can it offer the people who move in?
And I think that offer kind of goes around the world, really, doesn't it? Because after Abbeyfield has grown and developed in England and in Wales and in Scotland, that idea started to go across the globe. So Abbeyfield World Council is an organisation that represents Abbeyfield societies across the world, and we've got them in lots of countries, haven't we?
And it probably sounds a little bit random, the countries, because we've got them in Belgium, South Africa, Canada, Australia, if you visit our website, you'll see like the wealth of that international reach. But I think that again goes back to Richard Cargon, because when you listen to him speak, when he was in the army and then he come out the army and then he went travelling.
Yeah.
And I think it's his philosophy that's going out there.
No, exactly.
And then probably, of course, the link with King Charles.
Yeah.
Probably has helped the Commonwealth countries to pick up that mantle. Because
so for our listeners, Prince Charles was the patron of Abbeyfield and was so for many years. And after the coronation, the King has continued to be the patron of Abbeyfield. I've got a picture just behind me, actually, of Prince Charles was opening one of our houses in Redland, where did some of the interviews yesterday. So that connection to the monarchy has been really important for Abbeyfield. Abbeyfield. And as you said, a lot of those countries are Commonwealth countries that have got that connection as well. One of my staff went to see her son in New Zealand recently and found some Abbeyfield houses while she was on a holiday, and it felt like she could never escape from that, and decided that she might want to try and work from New Zealand for a couple of months. But I didn't say yes to that.
Yeah, we're kind of looking at that idea. No, but actually for the anniversary next year for 70 years, one of the areas that we were hoping to explore a bit more was the twinning element with some of our international family. And to see how the philosophy in different countries, how the ethos in different countries is incorporated, because really we're so similar.
Yeah.
You know.
And I think that kind of the core element of that ethos is neighbourliness, isn't it?
I like that.
Yeah. It's that idea that actually each of the houses isn't just a house with walls.
Yeah.
It's a house that's part of the community. And that when we were talking to Sue yesterday, she was talking about how each of the houses originally had little house committees, and they would be a local vicar or a local shopkeeper, different community members, wives of different community members who would come in and help with the house. So the original model was the housekeeper would work 6 days a week, and then the community would come in and cook on the 7th day. And that neighbourliness has been there since the beginning. And while we maybe don't have the same interactions now, my houses still connect very much with the local area around them. We have schools that pop in and do the dress rehearsals for their assemblies in the houses. We have, Neighbourhood Watch comes in and does their meetings in some of our houses. And that kind of connection is really important, because as we talk in one of the other episodes, we'll get some feedback from staff and residents, but people often think we're a care home, so they think we're an institution where older people come in and can never escape, and actually is very much not that. And that idea that what we are is a community hub, so we're there in a community, we're part of that community, and what people can come in and residents can come out. We've got lots of community activities that go around our houses, and our residents go to those as well as having things in the houses.
I think that actually is such a big point about the neighbourliness, because, again, going back to Richard Cargon with that first house in Bermondsey, I remember him saying the front door was always open. Yeah. So back then, that's what would have happened. They would have been encouraging people to pop in and say hello. I think we've moved on a bit from that as such. That's not. But a lot of our houses are very central. Yeah. And close to really good activities for older people for residents, to pop out and join in with anything that's going on locally. And I remember, I came and visited the houses in Bristol, in one of the first houses I came to see when I started to work here, and the rooms are actually beautiful. Yeah. The people's homes when you walk in, and there's a communal area, and it's very hard, I think, in pictures and videography to show the vibe that these houses have. Because they're all individual, aren't they? Each house, you've got 4 houses. I would say they're all individual.
Yeah, they've all got a personality.
They've all got a personality about them. And it's very hard to describe that. Even here, saying, oh, this house was this. Well, it was a feeling.
And it's a kind of a magic formula, really, because it depends on the type of house. So we've got one house that's about 10 years old, that's very modern and wood and glass. We've got the other houses tend to be a bit more Victorian or Georgian, and that makes one difference. But also the other secret ingredients is the staff and the residents. So we've got one of our houses does a breakfast club, so they'll all come down and they have their breakfast together, a little gang. Other houses don't want to go up that early, and actually they'll have a coffee morning, so they'll come and catch up mid-morning together. But that depends on the residents and how they want to interact with each other.
Yeah, I think that's it. It's about choice.
Yeah.
Residents, well, they will come and probably stay for a bit before they decide to sign a tenancy, because it's an apartment, it's a flat. We call it a room, but it's their home. Yeah. So, but they'll come and stay for a bit and see how they get on, and see if it's something they might want to do.
Yeah. So all of our houses offer like a month's trial, and 2 of our residents who talked to us yesterday were talking about how important that month's trial was for them, because they can come in for a month, see if they like it, and then actually decide if they want to go back or not. So we set the room up like it's a bit like a hotel. They don't have to bring their own furniture. They get to stay in it for a month as a bit of a holiday, and then they say, yes, actually, I really like staying here. And we don't have many residents who choose not to stay, but I think that it gives it's not a commitment. It's kind of a nice kind of opportunity for a couple of dates together before they kind of have to make a commitment. Yeah.
Yeah. And you know what? Just thinking there, I don't know, the Thursday Murder Club. Right, yes. Because I was so excited, right? Because I've been reading these books since they come out, because I absolutely love Richard Osman, I love him, and I was so excited for the Netflix, and I actually watched it on the day that it launched. I was very, my whole family were like, no, and I was like, no, I'm really watching this, and I thought, oh, has he been to Abbeyfield before? Because all right, we haven't got that grand castle. I don't know if you've seen the Netflix, it's a big grand castle that it's that their apartments are set in. But some of our houses look quite castle-like, quite impressive.
And I think not to take away from the Thursday Murder Club, but I suppose that the element of that is the interesting bit, is that in 1956, with the idea of creating a home for older people to live in was quite innovative, and it was quite a new idea. And actually what we're in now is, over the years, it's become quite a corporate thing. So we've got loads of corporate organisations that provide those glamorous retirement castles. And what Abbeyfield has done is continue to be that kind of stability in the middle, is to provide a service that is still not for profit. We're not trying to take money for shareholders, but we're still trying to provide something that has got a meaningful connection to residents, to the staff, and to the communities around it.
Absolutely. Right now, because our Thursday Murder Club, can we?
Yeah, well, we've got lots of clubs. One of our houses has got a history club, so they do a documentary a week and then a conversation afterwards about that. So I think that actually those kind of clubs, whether they're solving crime or just kind of enjoying different activities, is also a really important part of this. Whether we've got, there's a poetry club in one of our houses, but one of the other houses would hate that. But they know that they've got bingo on a Wednesday night. So actually, again, it goes back to that social interaction and that kind of community feel.
That alternative family.
Yeah, but also a choice. So you can choose to stay in your room if you want, or you can choose to take part in the community activities. And my office is based in one of our houses, and actually since we've moved the office in, I have to factor in a good kind of 45 minutes each way to come into my office and leave every day, because I end up taking part in an activity or sitting down because there's cake.
Cake. Well, that is actually, from what my experience with Abbeyfield so far, cake is very important.
Yeah.
But it is, when we talk about alternative family units, family meal time's very important, isn't it?
On the topic of cake, actually, I think that's probably a good time to finish, because we're coming to the end of this podcast, but over the next couple of episodes we'll be looking at more of what goes on in the houses, and also then to start looking at what happens around the communities of the houses as well, and cake is quite an important part of all of those. Yeah,
we love the cake at Abbeyfield. It's what we do when we go visiting, and there's always plenty of choice.
So thank you very much for listening to this podcast. We're looking forward to seeing you at our next one. And our next one is looking at inside our houses. So we'll get to see some of our residents, our staff, and to talk about what's really important to those people who live in our houses.
Thank you very much for joining us.
Bye.
Bye.
And I suppose the question for us is, what makes an Abbeyfield house? So that's what this episode is about. And I think for me, it's about those connections we've talked about before, and about how do people interact with each other.
And I think it's easy for us to say what we think makes an Abbeyfield house, because we're talking quite abstractly from that, aren't we? But really, we can't speak on behalf of the people who live there.
Not at all, no.
They're the ones who tell us what makes an Abbeyfield house.
Every day.
Yes. So they're probably the best people to listen to,
yeah.
Which we will do now.